Inside America's Boardrooms, the informational show for board members and corporate secretaries. Brought to you with knowledge partners NASDAQ, the Center for Audit Quality, and PwC. Along with content contributors Equilar, Meridian Compensation Partners, Wilson Sonsini Goodrich and Rosati, R.R. Donnelly, and the Society of Corporate Secretaries and Governance Professionals.
Welcome to this edition of Inside America's Boardrooms. I'm TK Kerstetter, the CEO of Boardroom Resources, and we have a very interesting show today. We're having a visit from the FBI, and specifically, let me introduce my guest. It is Randy Coleman, who is the Assistant Director for the FBI Counterintelligence Division. Randy, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you, TK. Appreciate it.
Probably the best place to start for us is maybe you could explain to our audience a little bit what the Counterintelligence Division is all about.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Let me just start by saying what the mission of the Counterintelligence Division of the FBI is. It's to identify, neutralize, and defeat hostile intelligence services that are operating against U.S. interest. And what I'd like to say first is that, you know, since 9/11, really, the FBI has transformed into an intelligence-driven national security law enforcement organization. And with what's important about that is that intelligence apparatus that's been created for the FBI since 9/11. And the intelligence apparatus has allowed not only the Counterintelligence Division of the FBI, but certainly the FBI as a whole to become much more aggressive, much more predictive, and much more proactive in the work that we do in order to get out in front of threats before they become a problem. And certainly within the Counterintelligence Division, our ability to be more proactive and predictive in what we're doing allows us to take a look at hostile intelligence services that are operating here in the United States and against U.S. interest abroad. To be able to address those threats before nefarious activity happens. So really that's the basis of the Counterintelligence Division. The intelligence that we collect now as part of that apparatus, along with the investigations that we conduct, really have identified that we're seeing a significant increase. And I will say as much that the FBI over the last 12 months has seen a 53% increase in our caseload as it relates to economic espionage. And so as a result of that, the FBI is on a national campaign right now to create an awareness throughout the private sector, academia, and throughout the United States government concerning economic espionage. And we've put together some training and awareness pieces that I'd like to talk about today.
Yeah, well, I know that we're going to spend this is actually going to be a three-part series, so we'll certainly get to that part of the process as well. I know that your area, that division, isn't responsible specifically for the cyber risk. There's a specialist in there. But cyber risk certainly has to be on the fringes of all the counterintelligence. Can you educate our audience just what kind of environment is out there related to state-sponsored, groups of hackers, whatever, from your experience that you need to deal with?
Yeah, I think it's a great point, is that technology has really changed the playing field as it relates to cyber and certainly the Counterintelligence Division. You know, historically, the Counterintelligence Division, we could focus on a human aspect where there had to be a human being that needed access to particular secrets, intellectual property or trade secrets. But what we are faced with now is you have a much more technically advanced threat from nation states and hacker groups and certainly criminal organizations abroad that are able to use technology to steal secrets, intellectual property and trade secrets from the government, from corporate America, and be able to do it from thousands of miles away. And so as a result of that, we've had to change the way that we address the threat.
And you know, a lot of people worry about the external threats, and that's what gets most of the publicity. But equally, people need to worry when they're talking about breaches or problems or sabotage. They got to worry about internal as well with their own employees and stuff. I assume that that becomes a concern for all companies in the FBI as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, an insider threat is a significant problem, as you mentioned, not only for the government but also corporate America. And that's part of the campaign is to bring an awareness about so companies can put in place through their human resource department, through their security department, and even through their corporate management, those mechanisms and processes to be able to identify and address insider threat. You know, it's really an interesting, when you look at the concept of insider threat, most, and if not all companies, even the government had a process in which there's a hiring up at the front end where you go through and try to identify people that are the right fit for a particular company. They go through a hiring process, there's an interview process, and even in the government in some portions where people need clearances, they have polygraphs and a very structured and aggressive background investigation that's conducted. The problem is that was a one-dimensional process, and it was done on the front end. And then at the end of that process, when somebody was hired, they were considered a trusted insider. And so certainly the FBI and many other government organizations, and in the recent accounts of Snowden and Manning, there needs to be a process to take a look at the existing workforce, people that are already on board, because things happen to people. Whether they go through financial difficulties, they have issues with their boss. People they have an axe to grind now, and so they become disenchanted with work and can cause them to actually do things to violate that trust. And so what we're talking to companies about is putting those mechanisms in place, whether that be through their security department to put together training and put together a mechanism of auditing and monitoring, but also with the human resources to really focus in on training and onboarding process when new employees come on board, building an awareness. And then with the corporate management, that awareness, right? So there's a culture that's built within a company that understands that they're trusted insiders. They know where their research and development is being held, and then putting in place structures to protect those trade secrets or that intellectual property, so they can make sure that the company remains viable and credible in whatever it is they do.
But as you explain this, it just reminds me that how big that challenge is, particularly when you're talking about former employees.
Right.
Okay? Because it's not like you can just make someone disappear, either whether they leave on unfriendly terms or even if they retire and say get in financial trouble or whatever. It just, the risk is an enormous risk.
That's right. And a great story, a recent story on a case, I won't name the company, but it was a case that we had out on the West Coast in San Francisco, where you had a company involved in the development of a technology called titanium dioxide. And this particular company did it better than anybody else in the world. And a nation-state actor wanted to steal that process. And as a result, and how they went about it, was targeting former employees that had the recipe to that particular science. And you know, there was some successes made by unfortunately by the nation-state, but as a result of the company agreeing to work with the FBI and allowing us to get involved, we were able to find those responsible and bring them to justice as a result of that. But that's a great point.
Well, I can tell you that this is one piece of knowledge that I know. Titanium dioxide is the thing that makes paint white.
Yeah.
And so how about that, viewers? He actually hit on something that I know a little bit about. But so anyway, the whole mix here sort of sets up a risk environment that almost has so many ends to it, Randy, that you just have to have sort of a culture And again, we're going to spend some time to talk about that and sort of what the FBI is doing. We'll save that for our next second series and our third series. I certainly want to thank you for joining us. We're going to have you right back so that we can, make sure that we cover all parts of our good fortune of having the FBI join us. So thank you for our first series, and that will conclude this edition of Inside America's Boardrooms. We hope you'll join us next week. Again, we'll take a look at part 2 of the FBI coming to visit Inside America's Boardrooms. Thanks for joining us.
Join us again next week for Inside America's Boardrooms. Brought to you with Knowledge Partners, NASDAQ, the Center for Audit Quality, and PwC. Along with content contributors Equilar, Meridian Compensation Partners, Wilson Sonsini Goodrich and Rosati, R.R. Donnelly, and the Society of Corporate Secretaries and Governance Professionals.